That's probably every publication from Hero Games ever on that shelf back there. Yeah. All right. So we've got them. And the as I said, we don't need to consult, maybe in sort of a spitballing way just to get your thoughts straight or something, but it's not like everybody has to agree on consensus all the way through this. It's actually kind of better if we don't.
Okay.
So and also to the extent to which we do this mechanically varies. You know the location, and you know what we said about the powers, and you know what we said about the basics of the kind of story we're doing. That's fine. Everything else, up in the air, and I'll just have to run with it. In other words, it's kind of like you guys inadvertently make up the setting at this point.
Okay, all right.
So we're playing.
Are we playing?
We're playing, but you're making up a character to do it. Now in Champions Beta, and this is even more different from the one that you have, Rick. There are 9 characteristics. 2 of them you're going to be very familiar with: Strength and Presence, base 10, bought point for point, 5 points as a die 6. Strength and Presence are their own beautiful selves. No problem. Then you also have some which are recognizable, but they're tweaked a little. They are Speed, Body, and Defense. We'll talk about those in a minute, but suffice to say that they're pretty much as you remember them, but with some differences that matter. When you buy your body, you're automatically going to get your recovery and your damage ratings, and all that stuff just comes from it. You don't have to do other things. So there's no constitution, for example. Speed, body, and defense. We'll deal with the costs in a minute. And then there are 4 of them which are very different from what you may remember. They are dexterity, intelligence, ego, and perception. Which I guess you can kind of put in brackets because you don't have to buy it outright. But those 3 are bought for their rolls value. Think of them as having a default of 11 for 11 or less, and then you just pay 10 points for each point up. So if you want a 12 or less for your dexterity roll instead of an 11 or less, then you're going to pay 10 points. And then CV, yeah. Huh?
What were the first 3 again? My apologies.
That's right.
And then what?
Strength and presence. And
speed.
Right. Strength and presence. Then speed, body, and defense.
Okay.
And then dexterity, intelligence, and ego. And and so the costs for dexterity, intelligence, and ego, they come at 11 or less for free. And then if you want them higher, it's 10 points per point. Similarly, speed starts at 2 for free, and then it's 10 points per point. Body starts at 10 points for free and is 10 points per point. Defense we'll hold off on in a minute. It starts at 0. Just leave it at that for now, and you can worry about that later.
Right, got it.
But so, therefore, as you can see, dexterity, intelligence, and ego are treated as rolls, not as scores. Okay. And furthermore, that you get a combat value that goes with each one, with each rating. So, like if you get dexterity 14 or less, then you'll have a certain combat value. So it just comes with it. So those are the scores, and as you can see, they're somewhat simplified, but they pretty much function very much the way you're familiar with.
Right.
It's like roll 3d6 or less. We're not doing any 9+ intelligence over 5 anymore. And the costs the costs for your character come out to be almost completely identical if you take the same thing and just put it in these terms. So
got it, understood.
Right. Now we're going to do what's called 3-cornered character creation. We've got the person, we've got the powers and we've got the problems. And stating those in very like non-pointy terms is good, but if like powers and points occur to you or disadvantages occur to you, that's fine too. But we need these in ordinary language. So if you're making up a character right now, I don't care which corner you start with, but has either of you actually come up with at least a notion about any of those corners for your character yet?
Sure, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Rick, you're first. Name one.
Okay, I'll start with person.
Mm-hmm.
So my character is he's kind of he currently he works at UCLA as a part-time professor in archaeology.
Fabulous.
He studied to be an archaeologist and went into military service to pay for his education. And while he was in military service in Iraq, he ran across. I guess I'm kind of drifting out of person too, but
no, that's fine. That's the point. Yeah. It's three-cornered. We can just bounce to each corner. It works.
That's where he already had archaeological training and discovered a dig site, an unknown dig site.
Excellent.
Where
Iraqi dig.
Where he got some documentation that led to his powers.
Gotcha. So magic script, or some ancient script of some kind.
Yep.
Right, gotcha. Okay, so we got that. Cool. And so there's a couple of corners, just to keep the ideas flowing. Jason, what do you find when you look at your corners?
My character is a construction worker.
Mm-hmm.
He is from Mexico City.
Mm-hmm.
He is here. He is in LA illegally.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
But in the process of getting into the United States, he ran afoul of a narco saint cult.
Ah, right. So that's a problem right there, right? Yeah.
Right.
So narco,
coyote process.
Cult, the coyote process. All right.
The coyote process, he ran afoul of a narco saint cult. As a result of this, he has gained, which are pretty standard brick. It's strength, toughness, endurance powers.
Okay.
But they come from Santa Muerte.
Aha, right. So Santa Muerte, the saint of death.
Okay.
Powers.
Saint of death.
Right. Gotcha. So excellent. So we've got that. Now, where you go from the corners, the way I like to look at it is then you quantify the pieces that you care about. You look at, like you're looking at strength and you're like, well, how strong do I have to be to lift and throw a car? And the answer to that is 30 and then you would have to really go to throw. If you want to be stronger than that, let me know. Buy it up higher. Well, we can keep going a little bit. You can either elaborate on some of these things, like you talked about what the ancient script might like have him do. You could talk about the visuals of what the powers look like. You could, yeah.
So a couple of things. So just a little bit more background that I didn't get a chance to cover.
Yeah.
So this character is a union of an Arabic mother and a Hispanic father.
Gotcha.
And he kind of is trapped. He kind of feels that he's trapped between these two worlds, that he doesn't exist in either culture correctly.
Perfect. So down here is in the problems, you've got a sense of kind of alienation / divided identity situation going on. So that's down there in the problems. So that's awesome.
Yep.
So we're looking at the three corners, and my claim is that once you have those down kind of qualitatively, doing the numbers for the character is like 90% done already.
Right.
And it also keeps us from spinning off into analysis paralysis because you can always bounce to another corner when you're stuck. You can always, try something out and go back and change it. It's not like working through I want to take the pressure off of, oh my God, I'm going to spend a point wrong.
Yep.
Right. So with that,
in terms of visuals,
mm-hmm.
so I'm basing this on a version of Curator that I had sent you before.
Sure.
So visually speaking, I like to think of it as he's Green Lantern,
mm-hmm.
but all of his things are a medieval focus.
Right. Archaic, definitely. So archaic, like customizable energy maces or ancient warrior stuff. Right. Okay, so cool.
Including that he, one of the ones I've envisioned, he can summon a horse.
Yes, perfectly reasonable.
And things like that. So they're all just special effects.
Yes, totally. I get that. It's kind of a cool mix of Hawkman and Green Lantern. So it's like the energies are Green Lantern, but sort of the imagery of the, now I have my mace, now I have my halberd, now I have my, my whatever that Mike Grell felt like, or Joe Kubert felt like drawing that day.
Right.
So cool. We have pretty good combo there then. Jason, Rick talked about his character being Arabic and Mexican. Mexican or just Hispanic? I'm not sure. European Hispanic? I'm not sure. But
I just said Hispanic, but probably Mexican. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So and being in a lot of being educated, being in the UCLA and everything, he's really feeling that pinch of the culture, what culture he belongs in. So that's a big part of it. And so cool. Now, as far as the powers, Jason, are you thinking of you talked about sort of strength and physical enhancement in general, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So first of all, gentlemen, my laptop isn't recognizing the headphones.
Okay. Well, you tried.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Let's go with some strength. Let's go with some increased endurance.
Well, let's take a look at how this works for numbers. If you were to increase body, which is 10 points per point, up from 10, your recovery is exactly that value. So that's one thing. Then there's the amount of damage you can take after defenses and not be stunned for a phase. Right? And that's twice.
I noticed that stun isn't.
No, it's not. If I walk through it, you'll see where it is. So the stun as a value is gone, but the status of stunned, meaning lose a phase because you got punched, that remains. Right, because that was really two terms that was one term for two completely different things. And the rating that's used up by damage, that if you run out, you're knocked out, is called knockout.
Okay.
Because that's what happens when you right. And then that's three times. Yeah, that's 3 times your body rating. And then and then 4 times your body rating is your endurance. So it's 1 times for recovery, 2 times for being stunned, 3 times for knockout, 4 times for endurance. Surprisingly enough, given all the spending one might do on Constitution and everything and strength and the original champions, this point expenditure is almost exactly identical to what you would end up with.
Okay. All right. So all these things are extrapolated out of body. Okay. That's
right. Well, the idea is if you want to decouple it, like for example, have some kind of special battery, you would buy body on a limitation which said endurance only, for example.
Oh, okay.
Right.
All right. That makes sense. All right.
So cool. We've got so that's really all you need to worry about with defense. Your defense starts at 0, and it's only 1 point for point, unless you want it to be resistant, in which case it's 2 points per point. But right now, we could take a look at, if you wanted, the disadvantages. And you'll see a couple that you're probably not that familiar with. One of them is called side effects. And what it is you buy a power, just like you would ordinarily buy a power, and you can go all the way up to 50 active points for it affecting you according to some trigger. Like, not in a good way. Like actually an attack or anything. Mental, if it's illusions, I mean, you're seeing the illusions, and it's causing you problems. So, the number of points you get for it is equal to the active points in it. And then, and the rule for disadvantages is that you can have 50 points of any one kind. So you could get like hunteds up to 50 points. You could get, vulnerabilities up to 50 points, that kind of thing. You'll see a couple of other things that are a little different. Berserk is gone, but there is still Enrage. DNPCs are now done differently. You can give the DNPC a few points to beef them up a little bit. That's fine, up to a certain amount. But you can give a DNPC up to 50 points of disadvantages. The idea being that their disadvantages are now yours. Experienced through that lens of that character. And that's how many points the DNPC is worth. So if you want, a DNPC who's in trouble because they're idealistic and they're hunted by the mob, then give them those disadvantages to however much you want them, and then that's how much the DNPC is worth to you. There's those, and a couple of other things are a bit different, but not too much. I squeezed the speed chart. So it's still pretty much itself, but it's kind of interesting to play with it at just 9 segments. So the speed chart's different. 4 is a lot more viable than it used to be. And 4 and 5 are pretty viable. To get to 6 is more like having 7 or 8 in the old chart.
Okay.
Right. So you don't have to buy the speed. You don't have to say, okay, I got to get to speed 5 or I suck. It's more like 3 is a slowish character. 4 and 5 are pretty strong players in the speed chart.
Because typically in Champions, when you play the 6th edition, you kind of almost had to have a speed of 5.
Oh, I agree. This is a little different. Yeah. 3 is actually playable. 5 is pretty quick. So think of 4, 5, 6 in the old chart is like 3, 4, 5 in this one.
Okay.
Yeah. The costs end up being pretty much similar to that functionality, so that's good. Now, so you guys are starting to kick around some points. Take a look and see. Think about people in your characters' lives, and then think of problems they may have, and how that relates to your 3 corners. So, for example, Jason, in the cult, well, hey man, you're in LA now. You don't have to deal with coyotes anymore. Except, why do you? Is there some reason a person?
Family.
Right. So family dependence.
Back at home.
Okay. Well, if we
back at home in Mexico, I'm concerned about.
Okay. Do you want those to be DNPCs? Because then we would be going back there too. Or do you want like a few family members here? How do you want to, however you want to do it is fine. Or think about one character who's in LA.
I think I'll have one family member here and the rest back there.
Right. That works.
And that one will be the DNPC.
Gotcha. Okay. And so with the prof at UCLA, you got the ex-military and you got the prof thing. Which of those do you want to reach into for supporting cast? Certainly both is fine.
I was mostly going to be focusing on the academic side.
Okay, sounds good. So maybe a graduate student, or maybe a colleague, maybe a weirdo who hangs around the university and is full of insights, but is too freaky to actually be officially included. Anything like that.
Honestly, one of the things that came to mind when I read the description is I didn't want to play a character who was grim and humorless, but I kind of wanted that disadvantage.
Right.
And so I have a DNPC who's my girlfriend, who's a social worker, who's grim and humorless.
Oh, fabulous! Yes, yes.
So I can play off that, but I don't need to be that.
You don't. Right. You can have it in play, but not be that. Yeah, I get that. That's a really, really good opportunity for this. One of the characters in my other current game, is very much like that with his DNPC. With psychological limitations, I want to emphasize, just like in the old rules, the content can be anything you want. You don't have to have the psychological limitation be something crazy. It could be a very sensible thing that your character happens to be very intense about, and that's okay. But what's interesting is that the content doesn't matter. If position A is more out there or extreme than position B, they're worth the same points if they have the same criteria for how often they show up and how you respond. The most playable is something that's common, but you're not irrational about, so it's just 15 points. You don't have a special response to it. You just it's triggered a lot, and you have an opinion. A good example, the way I like to talk about it is, let's say you had patriotic. And let's say one person says, my patriotic is triggered only sometimes, but it's an irrational response. And another person says, I'm patriotic too, but it's triggered all the time, and I have no irrational response or meltdown. So like the second guy has a bumper sticker and is always willing to talk about it, sees an opportunity to talk about it all the time. Whereas the other one may not be vocal about it at all, but when certain things about patriotism flip his lid, they fly off the handle. So you see, the content's the same, but the way the disadvantage works is completely different, and that's where the points come from. Which, okay, I hate to say, is exactly the way the old rules work, and very few people actually seem to know that. No criticisms, but I've had my share of CVK 20 points thrown onto the sheet as well, and I even know it's in the rules as an example, but if you actually read the rules, their example doesn't exemplify them. So,
okay.
So because nothing in the psychological limitations actually dictates your character's behavior, it dictates your character's opinion. So, and that's from a GM who used to say, you can't do that, you have CVK. And now I realize I was screwing it up all these years.
Okay.
So cool. So if you want to think of something that really denotes your character's values, please feel free to put it in there as a cycling. That's great. You don't have to make them a weirdo or a psychopath to do it. Let's see. Would there be... There's several ways to go with enemies. One is, now that you've been active as a superhero, you've made enemies through that. You've made enemies through that activity. Another way is to say, well, it goes back to the origin of my powers. Maybe I awoke Mesopotamian demons when I, did this, and they've been coming after me ever since. That's possible too. Or finally, you can have enemies that are far more about real life and what it's like. If you want immigration control and enforcement aware of your character, Rick, you can, for example.
Right.
And so if you want. The way it works is this. The fact that you made him an unregistered immigrant in the first place automatically means I can fuck with you or screw with you about ICE anyway. The question is whether you want points for it, which means it's like coming at you. It's like you're inviting it. You're saying bring it if you get points for it. Does that make sense?
Well, that kind of gives me multiple hunteds.
Well, again, you can have up to 50 points in hunteds. And if you look at the costs, you can see that you could keep them, the first is how big they are, and the second is how mean they are. And if you want, sometimes it's good to go big with a given kind of disadvantage, right? You can go big with hunteds, give yourself 50 points, and then throw more hunteds in with your DNPC. So you were just like Mr. Hunted, right? And so this guy is like the man with 1,000 enemies. That's cool. Yeah. Let me give you...
I would say that ICE is probably hunting me casually, whereas the Narco-Saint cult is hunting me actively.
Well, take a look at the point costs and go with it. The frequency of the hunted really isn't actually all that important. The way I look at it is if you have a hunted, get ready. They're going to be coming as much as I like them. As much as I like them and as much as events dictate, they're on you.
Okay.
Cool. Now let's talk frameworks, because my concept of the frameworks, as Rick, you've perceived this already. My concept of the frameworks is kicks the tires all over the place. If one wants to have a bandolier of differing attacks, the best way is probably a variable power pool. Because that way you can make up new ones if you feel like it. And that way it can be very, very focused on how the powers change. You could put a limitation, they can change with a half-phase action. And then that way you've got the whole trade out the clip thing going on right there. I know people are afraid sometimes of the variable power pool because it seems like too much too soon. But just go with a special effect. This is my weapon. It can do X thousand things. Fine. I don't have to use every power in the book. I will use what makes sense. Now...
Say, Ron.
Yeah.
Based on our previous conversation, you've brought back elemental control.
I have. Right? That's actually now the primary one.
Right, because I want to have a variety of sort of strength.
Right, strength-based kind of differing effects. Well, you froze on us, Jason. Yeah.
That's why the echo went away.
Yeah. But
so I have. My main attack is a martial artist.
Right. Now there's three things to buy in martial arts. There's, if you want, you could just get punch and kick, 10 points, the maneuvers.
Okay.
2, you could get all the other maneuvers.
So block and
right, and there's also a new maneuver, which is to actually move after an attack.
Okay.
You actually
can. What's the cost? What's the cost on those?
That for the bag of them, that's 10 points too.
Okay.
Right. And then the third one is what used to be called find weakness.
Right.
And so those 3 all together would give you all the possible martial arts fun, or you can pick any one or two of them as you see fit for a given character.
All right, so I'm going to pass on the Find Weakness, but I'll be having the other two.
Excellent. So that's plus 3d6 punch, plus 66 kick.
Oh, 3 and 6. Okay.
Yeah. And so it's also kind of nice because, frankly, I really wanted martial arts to be worth its money for the lower strength character. You can give yourself a pretty nice, solid martial kick for that. And you're not dinking around down there. Jason is obviously trying to rejoin the call, which is good. That's really the only solution.
So just so you know, I've defined my kick as a haymaker. It's still a punch.
Right.
But
right. That's perfectly okay. And you know what? As circumstances warrant, somebody's got your arms pinned behind you. Well, then use your foot and do the same thing, and that's okay too. That's fine. But what I like to think about is, what does the artist like to draw? There is that one punch that Sal Buscema, for his 50 years drawing comics, he had a standard punch which shows the hero in full, like from the front, the hero's in full follow through, and the bad guy's like floating in the air, like totally upended by the punch with his head upside down looking at you with a big grimace on his face. And that was Sal Buscema's like take home punch panel. So, that's the way to do it.
So just so you know, on my character sheet, I kind of define, even though it's a variable power pool, I define slots.
Oh yeah. It's always good. Right.
It's just pre-thinking.
That's
so
perfectly
it's like,
okay.
Hey, this is, when he says I'm summoning a horse, this is what I mean.
Yes. And so, yes, I think it's a good thing for your character to have several go-tos. And then, of course, this time I'm going to drop my horse by a die so I can have a little defense, more defense.
Exactly.
Right. And that's fine. I mean, that's really,
exactly.
It's very, very functional.
And just so you know, actually, I guess I'm lying there. There is the full realm of mixture, because I have movement, I have the shield, which allows for like a force wall or a martial, a missile deflection, and then the offense. So it's kind of all in there.
That's perfectly okay. So what we have is I think some pretty good ideas. You can kind of see this coming forward. To continue with framework talk, I like the idea of the variable power pool for what you got, with some fairly well conceived go-tos, so that way you're not just making it up every minute. Like, the improv theater of the variable power pool, I think, is fun in a pinch, but it's a real chore if you're forced to do exactly that every time. And it depends on the concepts. You have kind of this ritualistic thing going on, so certain formulaic applications seem to make a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's cool.
Although I still have the skill to
shift it
to shift it in game.
No, that makes perfectly good sense. Going without that's a real decision to give that up. To not take that option is.
Well, a couple of the costs ended up being a little higher, especially given the speed typo. That's 25 added on.
Right. Well, that's a leftover from alpha, is what that is. So
sure, and no worries. I'm not.
Yeah. So let's see. So
I just need to come up with a few shavings.
The shavings I would suggest is in the characteristics. If you want to bring, like say your dexterity down a couple points. Just make a couple of points of your dexterity dependent on using the variable power pool. So you've got to like ramp up to be expressing a power from the pool, and then you've got your full range of. I get that he's an ex-military guy who knows some martial arts.
Yep.
But if you want to keep that, then you might want to make the other, his really superness be dependent on that, on the magic, on the ritual stuff.
Okay, that's a good call. Yeah.
So that's a possibility. And then another possibility is that we look at the skills. And one of the nice things about Champions Now is, of course, you don't have to pay through the nose for it to be able to read or ride a bicycle or know the mailman or any of that stuff.
Right.
And so all that's just given. You're a prof. We know you got an office. You're a prof. We know that you know 100 other people around the world and around the country, full of information. You're a prof. We know you have classes and students and have a certain lifestyle, unless you say otherwise, and all that stuff. And so that's all there. So really, the only skills, really, you probably don't have to take any skills except the martial arts. All you need for all your prof stuff is intelligence roll. For anything military, anything about your military background, you just use your basic rolls for it and you're fine. You don't have to have any skills. You get all the skills in a bag.
The only two skills that I had, and they may be up for negotiation when I'm trying to come up with the savings, were besides the martial arts. Well, actually, I'll tell you that the 4 skills I had were detective work, which is kind of
researching,
researching and trying to figure something out,
which is good.
Stealth, just kind of left over from just part of the martial arts package, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Then the 20 parts of martial arts, and at the moment I have 1 skill level.
Right,
martial arts.
That's a good thing. I would suggest knocking off the stealth because it's very useful to stay focused and to say, well, what does he do as a hero? He rides in on a big freaking magic horse is what he does as a hero.
That's a good point.
Do we really need, how many skulking around pillars do you want to do before you do that, right?
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Well, especially because you can open a portal in the air and gallop through it if you want with powers like that. So, that's at that point you kind of go, oh yeah, So
it's true.
So that's kind of that's sort of my thinking, and really, it might be good to look too at the power that I call awareness. All of the senses, all the danger sense, mind scan, all that stuff is now composed using the options in awareness.
Yeah, I actually had not. This wasn't on the version that you saw, but on the version that I was tweaking this morning. I was tweaking this morning when I got your words. I added in Mystic Sense with Analyze.
Excellent. That's perfect.
In the variable power pool.
You know what I'm thinking, actually, maybe take that out of the variable power pool and put some cool limitations on it, like one of them is shutdown, which means that you have to go all limp and helpless while you use it. Another one might be costing endurance. This is something that actually takes effort on your part. The default is that it doesn't, but if you make it cost endurance, it can save you some points. And it kind of works for the character that this is a matter of effort for him to be aware. He's not just Doctor Strange walking around in tune with the universe. He actually has to do a thing. And we get to watch him sweat.
That makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. So at this point, go ahead.
Can I ask a question on growth?
Yes, I fixed things a little bit. The new document, okay. I took your words to heart and I said, that's right. I went through and I made density increase really cool. Or no, I made growth really cool and I forgot to go back to density increase. So the very next night when I was playing my other game, I gave a character multiple levels of density increase with some ideas about how it would work, and it ended up pretty cool. So now density increase is different. It's more focused on defense and lower and less knockback, whereas growth is focused more on strength and distance covering distance. Okay. So they have the same costs, but they actually are fairly different. And I didn't want density increase to be a massive strength increase device. One could, for example, buy strength and make it dependent on the density increase, and that would be cool if you want to go that way. I'm trying to keep these packages, like D-Solid and all the rest of them, I'm trying to keep them really small packages, and then you factor other powers into them as you want. So if you want bullets to pass right through you, you're going to have to buy some defense along with your D-Solid. Stuff like that. Because otherwise... Yeah, otherwise they end up being too cost effective and it's really annoying.
So what I found when I was, deconstructing everything, I had built it with density increase with limitations that were, hey, I'm bigger and taking up more space.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's not density increase, that's growth.
Right. So check out growth and see, and that's cool.
This version has, when he's on the horse, he basically has one level of growth. Right.
So you're going to get like +5 strength. You're going to move a lot faster. You're going to get a lot. And also
it's connected. It's connected to his running.
Yeah.
So it's
perfect. Of course. So I think the cool thing here is that you're bigger, you move faster, and you get +5 presence.
Right.
That's the biggie. Density increase doesn't give you extra presence. Growth does. And I kind of like the idea.
Sitting up with the horse, and he gets +5 strength, so he can move things faster because the horse can help him, or
absolutely correct,
leverage, or whatever the special.
It makes perfect. I think it works really, really well. It makes the horse formidable and impressive and fun. Right? You get to go charge now. Rock and roll.
That's right. One of the things I was trying to do, and I don't know, just trying to play with what the rules are, what allows and not allowed, right? So, was trying to put high impact, have my lance be high impact on my martial kick.
It's a little tricky. You would have to, you can't buy a naked advantage. That's all there is to it. You have to get an actual attack. And so there's also the question of what you want to pull out of the variable power pool. If it's that much of a signature for you, it actually might be more expensive, but it also means you don't have to trade it off with anything. So, so that's a thought. I mean, at the moment, if you just bought extra strength in the variable power pool, that would be fine. Yep. Just add yourself 10 points of strength and you're good. I mean, you got some extra stuff in there. Or here's an interesting point. You could buy a small blast, even just 2 or 3 dice, which is cheap as dirt.
Yep.
Give it the high impact advantage, and then make it a strike and attach it to your kick. So that means that you do your kick damage and you do this extra damage. And even though this extra damage probably isn't going to get through the defenses, all the body will be knockback.
Right.
So therefore you're adding like 2 or 3 dice body, so 2 or 3 inches of knockback to every time you hit with that kick.
Right, so it kind of becomes an automatic little bit of knockback.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I also have the limitation on it that, you need at least 5 hexes of run.
Right, you got to get there. Yeah, so this is your charge. Yeah, that's perfectly good sense. Only with either a move and attack, or if you're making a move through whatever, anything where you have gone in like that would be fine.
I'm here.
That's great, Jason. Thank you for making all that effort to come back. Actually, it sounds great.
Sorry about that.
No, we have really got somewhere. We've really got somewhere with Rick's character. He's a portal opens in the air and a mystic horse gallops through, and it's got him on its back, and he's like all like mystic armor kind of thing going on, or some sort of cool weapon of the moment, and it's pretty much a variable power pool, dude. And there's also some pretty neat things going on too with the specific limitations and things, giving them defining the horse as growth, getting some interesting attacks with charges, stuff like that. So we're getting a pretty good look at the powers. Oh, and also, if he does sweaty effort, then we've got mystic and danger awareness. Evil is afoot sense, which is a good thing. So we were talking before all the technical stuff happened. We were talking about frameworks, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Yeah, go ahead and tell me what you were saying about the elemental control.
Well, I want to buy some characteristics as elemental control.
To do that, they have to cost endurance. If they do, give them the endurance limitation, you're good.
Yeah, no, we can do that. That's not a problem. I've decided that my character has a variety of religious tattoos that glow whenever he uses his powers.
Fabulous.
And that he's unhappy with and generally disturbed by his own powers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he didn't ask for this, right? The freaking weirdo cultist tattooed him.
Ask for it.
Right. Do you want to make any of your powers tricky, which is one of my favorite new limitations? A tricky power, when you use it, it doesn't go off by itself. That's another one. But a tricky power, when you use it, to direct it properly, you have to make an ego roll. Otherwise, it distorts your intent. Or at least wanders off a little on its own. So if you don't want to, that's cool. Another one.
His character is being very, very physical. His powers are very physical.
Right. Okay. So. Yeah. And then you also have a few other interesting possibilities for powers being, if not disobedient, at least there's always burnout, which I always thought was more fun than activation. They're both there, but I like burnout better because then you get to use it, and then the question is whether you can use it again. That's a possibility.
I like that. I'm going to make a note of that.
Yeah. And then you... so there's a few other things there, too. Cool. Well, how about some names? Because we've got a couple of interesting possibilities for names. Especially because we've got Spanish to work with in both cases. Or... we can also get really funky and do like Babylonian stuff for Rick's character. So the idea that your character...
Why don't you go first, Rick?
Yeah.
So I had intended my secret ID's name to show my confused duality.
Right.
So Kasim Plata.
Right.
Is the name, and so Kasim has the root that means basically at odds.
Perfect. Does he? Is it spelled with a Q? Q-A-S-M?
K-A-S-E-E-M.
Got it. Right. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Okay. And so then.
And then for the hero ID name is the Curator.
All right, the Curator. Got it. Yes. Excellent. Okay. And so, Jason, do you have any notions? Even something Aztec comes to mind, right? I don't know.
That's not the way I want to go with this character. So,
no problem.
This guy is first and foremost, he is a construction worker. It's not an afterthought. He's his original intent was to come over the border and simply work as a construction worker, send money home, do all the usual sort of things that this implies. So I want his superhero name to be Carhartt. Because if you look at your construction workers here in the Southwest, they're always wearing Carhartts all the time. And if you have the full Carhartt suit, the sort of overalls with jacket, the hood actually comes pretty far over your face. So you could actually have a secret ID where it kind of comes over your eyes.
Right.
But you are in construction worker clothes.
Okay.
At the same time. No need for anything like...
So it's like being called...
like bandanas. Or
right. So we can avoid that. You're right about that. And another interesting thing about it is that it is... it's like being called the cape or the hood or something because that's what you're wearing. Right.
And he's a very practical guy, and he got the name because in times when he's done heroic things, he's the guy in the Carhartts.
I always like the idea that for some characters, it's not what you want to be called, it's what they call you. Which is kind of good.
His name is Israel Cruz.
Holy cow. You guys are like the weirdest multicultural bunch ever. Okay, cool.
Well, actually, I have a friend who visits Mexico City whose name is Israel Cruz.
Well, there you go.
So maybe it's just a cool sounding name that a friend of mine has.
Let's start talking about these hunteds. Let's see if I got them right. We've got, we definitely have your cult, right, Jason?
Mm-hmm.
And then you also wanted ICE involved?
Yes, but the ICE thing would be casual. Like he just needs to keep an eye out for it.
Right.
The narco saint cult is active.
Right. They're ruinous on him. Yeah.
Yes.
And so then what about the DNPC? What disadvantages did they have? If you thought of any.
His DNPC not feckless, that's not the right word. His dreamy. His dreamy brother who's a musician who has a head full of rainbows and doesn't take care of himself.
Gotcha. Okay.
Dreamy musician brother.
Perfect. And so that's awesome. And
I actually have 2 hunteds as well.
Yeah. What do we got?
So the first one is this organization which I've called the Mandrake Foundation.
Aha.
And they're an ancient and secret mysterious cult that has decided that the find that I found was theirs.
Right.
Was a secret stash of theirs from that they had lost, and that I've taken their power away from them.
Got it. Okay.
Did you ever watch Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
No, I haven't seen the show.
Yeah.
So
I've seen some of it.
The cult that was trying to bring back the creature from the other planet is kind of how I envision these guys.
Okay.
I'll check it out. Yeah.
So I mean, basically, they were just long-term planners that they have a multi-generational mission to bring this creature back.
And long-term planners can never, ever deal with the stumbly normal dude who ends up in the middle of all their stuff. That's just how it is. I go with the stumbly dude who discovers it by accident. They always seem to do a little better out of the whole deal somehow.
Rick, was that their subplot that had to do with their awesome version of Ghost Rider? Who has like the muscle car?
It wasn't the Ghost Rider plot. It was the plot where they ended up going to another planet where this it was basically an alien they were trying to bring back. That was, and they kept sending a volunteer every 20 years to feed it. So
no.
Die.
Oh no.
So it wouldn't be dead in 400 years.
All right, yeah.
The cults kept sending a volunteer to kill.
That's fantastic.
To be eaten by the monster. Yeah.
So, what's the other? You said you had a couple in mind. What's the other one?
And the other one was, I didn't come up with, but I just thought maybe they might have some supers that ended up working for them. So I made up one called the Black Knight.
Right. So we got the Black Knight there. Well, of course, you've got your whole Mesopotamian ancient warrior thing. We need a crusader in there.
Exactly.
Right.
That's the Black Knight.
Right. And so now let's go a little bit more with all three corners, though. I mean, you've got it's okay just to have one hunted. What other disadvantages seem to kind of work really well for Kas'im? It seems to me as though he could really max out on cool psychological limitations. Just a whole bunch of different views, bunch of different... Is he religious? Is he observant? And in what?
Yeah. So here's how I kind of broke it down.
Yeah.
So actually, since you just said religious, I'm going to kind of break in a physical limitation. That is the religious view. So he needs to pray, and in the character sheet I have it in quotes.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, twice a day to keep his powers.
Excellent.
Can you say
Right.
what?
He needs to focus his mind, basically. But
Yeah.
he needs to pray.
Yeah.
He hides it by praying.
Yes.
Right?
I get that. Yeah. The curator seems very strongly oriented toward all kinds of different aspects of managing the powers. And so you just go right ahead. Think of the limitations and think of the disadvantages. They don't all have to be like that. But if you need help thinking about getting a few more points, you say, how does there's a lot of angles on this power, I mean, we've got a lot of the problems come with all of the ins and outs of managing this ancient, mystic, complicated thing.
Yep. So I gave myself just a 5-point physical limitation.
Yeah.
For
that's fine. Take a look at that. Yeah.
Let me go through some of the others that I have.
Well, if you've got, we'll do the list. It sounds like you're well on your way. I just wanted to kind of get the wheels turning, and it looks like the car already left the garage, so I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna. I wave happily, at this point. Bye, So that's cool. But here's one last thing to keep us from going absolutely crazy, and without any need for a complicated backstory. Just tell me what your characters do together. Because we're going to start. We're not going to have some kind of how they met. Except as a flashback later. We will just say, okay, they know each other, they contact each other, they respect each other, and they're in on something together. And
if I may?
Yeah.
The curator is trying to help Carr out his powers and understand them.
Good enough.
Because he was essentially kidnapped and mystically tattooed just trying to buy his way over the border.
Mm-hmm.
He does not have a clear idea of why or if it and be a normal person to get. He doesn't understand the powers. The curator sounds like the kind of guy with magical power.
I agree. And another interesting thing is I like the idea of Carhart as being really freaking streetwise. And even if it isn't his native city, you could give him a regional awareness that basically means
Everybody gets those that as an run.
Okay.
Just from my experience personally.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. No, I totally get it.
Sense.
But look at the power awareness, and it doesn't have to be defined as a power. It's just you can define it in such a fashion that it's effectively like Batman streetwise. You know what's going down, where and when.
Sure.
And that's very doable.
Presumably champions now will retain skills like Streetwise.
No, it hasn't. It retains. It's only got very basic skills. And so what you would do is you would have the awareness, and then there's a limitation that ties it to a role of your choice, whether it's a skill or a characteristic. So you would say you would make your intelligence roll, and then your awareness is doable.
So I would buy Streetwise as sort of a modifier.
There is no
skill modifier.
Not really. There isn't a Streetwise. There's only those few 4 or 5 skills from the original. Very few, because Streetwise. Maybe
I'm not explaining myself well.
I would. Okay.
I would define one of those skills that way.
What you would do is you would define a power, which is awareness. You would define it appropriately. And then you would give it the limitation skill-based.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could either tie it to a genuinely listed skill, like detective work, for example, or you could define it to a characteristic role, perception or intelligence in this case.
Okay.
And so basically what you've done is create a skill. You basically created an investigative or streetwise skill. It just by basically taking. But you see that it's very unrealistic because you can give it like a whole regional scope. You can actually make it a really big thing. So it can do a lot more than what a skill can do. Right.
Realistic.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I think you'll actually enjoy looking at that when you glance over the document. That there's less things on the sheet than there used to be, but the way they clip together with their options makes an enormous range. We talked about this, Rick. Jason and I had a conversation recently where I took the old Doom Patrol from the 60s and used it as my gold standard for builds.
I saw you mention that on one of your videos.
Yeah. And then, but I also didn't mention that I also looked at the original Luke Cage, Hero for Hire, written by several people, but especially as contributed to by Billy Graham, one of the great black comic artists. And he really went to town on like giving this comic its authenticity. And he and I really said, okay, let's remember that we're talking about a lot of things that aren't tangibly referred to as powers. When is Luke Cage able to get things done in a way that would be, I mean, that basically is just because he's the protagonist, damn it. He's just that badass. And then you look and you say, oh, God, this guy really can get from this side of town to that side of town because he knows the town, okay? He knows it better than you.
Okay.
He's going to get there before you can. You know, stuff like that. So I really thought about how these softer plot-affecting roles can be expressed by powers, too. So even though his, quote, technical powers is just that he's strong and tough, Luke Cage is actually, the original one, I mean, is actually quite a range of powers across the rulebook.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And particularly also since he tends to get phenomenally tough if he's confined. Chain him up, and you are in one hell of a lot of trouble. Over and over, if he's confined or encaged or in any way, look out. He can bust up a lot more. He can get a lot more places. He will do phenomenally more damage to you than in the fight scene that got him chained up. So, things like that. I've been looking through those comics going, how are they written? How does this character really shine? And then you see reasons for limitations that are a lot more interesting. So, those are, so we don't have to do that. And I tend to be overcomplicated. I really do tend to be overcomplicated with Champions rules. But on the other hand, just keep in mind that if you do the character in broad strokes right now, the room for refining it through these rebuilds with a few more points as we go along is very, very broad.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, this sounds good.
You guys are working together in terms of trying to work with the powers themselves. And, of course, you're both well aware that you've unlocked mystic secrets that, bear. But in terms of going and doing a thing, we're heroes together. We're going to hit the wall running together. That's where we kind of have to remember that if that doesn't happen, then we don't have a comic. So you don't have to define it. I'm not that big a fan of defining that ahead of time. Like, okay, we both are hunted by Dr. Death. I'm kind of not into that so much. But if you want to think about a shared mission of some kind, that's a good thing.
Okay.
I'll get a character sheet ready in the next few days using the handout. And I'll go ahead, Rick. I'll go ahead and I don't know what it's called. Friend you or whatever.
Yeah. Go send a friend request.
On
that's
Discord.
the way. Perfect.
Okay.
So click on him with a right click. Yeah. Click on, and then you guys can.
I'll have to do it after I get.
Right, because he's on the phone. Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
So
okay. All right.
So cool. We'll do that, and I'll send an email too, so that we're all freaking, electronified together. Yeah. Sound good?
Can I ask you a question, Ron? A rule question that I got stuck on that I was trying to find the cost, and I couldn't find it in the version I had. It may be fixed, but so I have the variable power pool, and I have the variable power pool skill, and the base cost is 5 for an 11 or less roll, as I understand it.
Right.
And I couldn't find verbiage that said what is the is it 5 more for every?
No, you just go to the skill levels. Now we have one rule for pluses. You want pluses? We've got the skill levels, and you just use the same rules for everything.
Okay, so it's a skill level rule.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then another thing to think about too. Don't forget paying for the control cost. You know about that, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Right. We're good.
I have
You're
the control
good.
cost. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, guys. I'll see you later.
Okay.
Thanks for your time. Thank
Nice
you,
meeting
Jason,
Rick.
for joining
See you
us.
later on. Thank you.
Likewise.
No
thank you.
problem.
Take care, guys.
Nice meeting you.